This is actually a Rashi Sikh on Miketz. Yeah, we spent forever on Vayeshev, moving on to Miketz. Yosef went to Egypt. He became a slave. Then he was thrown into a pit and became a prisoner. Which meant that not only he lost his rights, he lost his job. He couldn't even do something with somebody else by somebody else's command. He was useless. And he has success. How can you have success in a pit? There's only one answer. To hang loose. To submit. To I'm looking for a word. To cut himself slack. To trust God. Leave it to God. The moment you try to help yourself and you're in a pit, you're in trouble, you hang loose, the Eibishter finds a way. And he has this great success. He spends actually 13 years in that little hole. 12 and a half years in that hole. More than 12 years in that hole. And he's put in charge. And of course the story at the end of it was that he helped the baker and the winemaker find out what was going to happen to them in 3 days hence. He asks the winemaker to do him a favor and intercede on his behalf with the Pharaoh, and of course the winemaker doesn't remember him, and he forgets him. He doesn't remember him and he forgets him. And Yosef HaTzadik spends 2 more years in the pit. And after those 2 more years, the Pharaoh has dreams, and the Pharaoh's dreams need to be interpreted. Nobody can interpret them, and the rest is history. So this week's parsha begins by Miketz. It was at the end of the 2 years, and something is going to happen which is going to get Yosef out of the pit and into the center of the world, literally. So Rashi says, Miketz. I'm reading the text. Now girls, you know the rule. If you just follow what I underlined, you won't get lost. If you don't just follow the line, you're lost already. Miketz ki targum misef. It was the end of the 2 years. Now ask any child, what is the translation of the word Miketz? It means, and it was at the end. So why is Rashi stating the obvious? Why does Rashi have to explain the Miketz? It was at the end. Of course it's the end. And the Rebbe points out that there are a number of other places in the Chumash that are behind us. Already we've had the word Miketz. Rashi has never ever felt the need to translate the Miketz means at the end, because it's self-understood. Why all of a sudden is he interpreting Miketz it was at the end? So we move to the left, page 197, second column, and I'm reading inside. Wenn Teire sagt, if a gewisse Passirum, when Teire says about a certain event, as is Yikumen Miketz, that it happened at the end, Weistes, the fact that you say that this event happened at the end of the other event, it shows as der zweite Meure is Yikumen, that the second event happened out at the Tzor from the Mershke Meure, as a consequence of the first event. If you have 2 events, and you say at the end of one begins the second, that means that the first one brings the second. It's not one ends and the other begins, but the first one ushers in, it dominoes in, it catapults in from one to the next. In unser Pasuk, bottom of the page, in this Pasuk, is aber lechede nishaychet zu sagen, in this case it's impossible to say, as der case was seen, from the Friedrich der Zelo, at the end and the conclusion of the earlier story, is das was upare chaylim v'geimer v'dabe saramashkim v'geimer, that the Pharaoh had a dream and the Saramashkim told him about Yosef. But Adarabbe, to the contrary, what happened last week? Last story finished how? As we didn't remember. The winemaker did not remember Yosef. When he forgot him. He says it turns out, what happened last week with the dreams and the winemaker that he forgot about Yosef, it finished a long time ago, when it hat nicht gebracht, didn't bring the next event. So normally when you say the Miketz is after domino A fell, domino B fell, because domino A pushed it. But the Saramashkim forgot Yosef, didn't remember him. So the dream of Pari is not connected to the last story, it's a brand new story. So why does it Miketz? Because there's no connection between before and after, and usually that's what the word Miketz means. At the end of one, the second begins, because the first ushers in the second. Dar for Rashi, Mefarer sein second column in the middle, Rashi has no choice but to tell us. Has to prove it, as Eich Miketz und der Pasuk meint Misef, that even in a case where A does not usher in B, Miketz still means the same thing, end. Normally, Miketz means Miketz. It was at the end of the first car is the second car, and the end of the second car is the third car. And it's logical because the first car brings the second car, and the second car brings the third car. But in this case, where A did not bring to B, to the contrary, A ended with forgetting, and B is an altogether different event, you have to know Miketz, even though Yosef sitting in jail for those certain years was not the reason for his going out of jail. Yosef's meeting the Sad HaMashkim was not the reason for his going out of jail because the Sad HaMashkim forgot him. Nevertheless, it means Miketz. It was at the end of. Go ahead, don't be afraid.
I don't understand. So it wasn't the cause of the release, and it was the cause of the release.
No, it wasn't the cause of the release. What happened afterwards? That's all. Even though it's not the cause of the release. In other words, normally the word Miketz means the end and the end of the first and the cause of what's going to follow. In this case, it means the end of the first, even though it's not the cause of what's going to. You have to understand, I'm taking a Rashi Sikh and making it a bit of philosophy Sikh. That's the Rashi. You should know Miketz means end even when it doesn't mean cause. That's all. That's all you got to know.
Okay.
Now, that Even Ezra, which is the bottom of 198, girls, has a very novel idea. This is a famous Even Ezra. Zok says, top of 199, as the word Kates can mean a nit not blaze safe not echt chila. The word Kates means an end. You know what else it means? A beginning. Does anybody know Hebrew? A little bit. What is the meaning of the word Ktsei? Ktsei, kuf tzadikei, Ktsei.
At the corners.
Edge. Everything has two edges. The head of the table and the foot of the table. So Miketz could mean the end. Miketz could also mean the beginning. It just means the side. So it wasn't at the end of the 2 years. It was at the beginning of the 2 years. And the Even Ezra has a very, very strange idea. He holds Miketz Shasayim Yom meint nid the soft not the onim for Shasayim Yomim. That Pari has a dream, and it takes Pari 2 years to get to Yosef. But here was Miketz in the beginning of Shnasayim Yom of the 2 years. Pari has a dream, and he spends 2 years seeking counsel from all kinds of people. Nobody can help him. And at the end of those 2 years, he started back. Oh, I forgot something. I got some information for you. Your Majesty just may be able to help you. Verstehst? It's a whole nother read of the story. Now, what's advantageous about the Even Ezra's read of the story is that the word Miketz now makes sense. It was the beginning of a 2-year period when the Pharaoh would be uncertain about his future, and only at the end of that time would Yosef come and alleviate it and redeem it. It's a whole different meaning of the word Miketz, right? But the Rebbe has a problem with it. What's the problem with it? The problem with it, because if you learn the Chumash with Rashi, you get the impression that not a lot of time passed between the time of the dream and the ushering in of the 7 years. According to Even Ezra, he has a dream, it takes 2 years to get it interpreted, and right away it all happens. But we're not worried about technical details. We're worried about the philosophical significance of all of this. The word Miketz, according to Rashi, means the end, even in a case where the end is not the beginning of the next step. And the Even Ezra says Miketz means it's the beginning of the next stage. Okay? Turn to page 200. Based on the last 9 minutes and 17 seconds, where we explored a complete Rashi Sikha, which would take an hour, and an Even Ezra, which would take another 15 minutes, we move on to the spirit of this. Girls, this is what I wanted to get to. This is not Rashi class. Remember, we are journeying through the Rebbe Sichos in the story of Yosef and his brothers to discuss what? Golus. Yosef and his brothers represent Golus. In this Golus experience that we are now exploring, there are 3 characters. Yaakov, Yosef, the brothers. Right? Yaakov shouldn't be a player. He shouldn't be a part of the story. But he is a part of the story. He's a part of the story because of a phenomenon called Bikish Yaakov Leisha V'Shalva. Whatever that means, you can get the tapes to the earlier classes. But Yaakov is involved in the story. And as it's going to turn out, Yaakov is involved in the story. He's going to sit in Golus. And as far as he's concerned, Mashiach is here already. The 17 best years of Yaakov's life are lived in Mitzrayim, because as far as Yaakov is concerned, the Gula has already happened. That's Yaakov's relationship to the Golus. You with me? His children are going to go into Golus and they're going to suffer. And they're going to go through it. And they're not going to know when it's going to end. And then finally it's going to end, there's going to be a redemption, there's going to be a time, and the Matan Torah, and going into Israel, building a Beis HaMikdash, and the rest is history. Correct? In between Yankov, there's nothing to do with the Golus. And the Shvatim who suffer through the Golus is this guy named Yosef. What's his relationship with the Golus? His relationship with the Golus is he's going to master it, and conquer the Golus. He's not going to be above it. He's going to win it. He's going to be free in Golus on Golus' terms. He's going to become the king of Egypt, or the vizier, the vice king of Egypt, Mishneh Lamelech. But it's going to be a process. And the process is going to be that Yosef needs to go into Gehenna, into the worst situation. And he needs to come out of that worst situation. Hashem Matzliach, and Matzliach B'yadeh, he has to go through all of these hardships until he is redeemed from his hardships. But redeemed from his hardships doesn't mean redeemed from his hardships and out of Golus. But redeemed from his hardships means redeemed from his hardships and free within Golus. Correct? Says the Rebbe, the word Miketz means two things. Rashi's Miketz and Even Ezra's Miketz. Let's read it inside now. In Vayhi Miketz Yosayim Yomim. In the word, and it was at the case of 2 years, and in France, Svein Yonam Hofkim, the two opposites. We call those two opposites Rashi and Even Ezra. But let's do philosophy now. Aleph. Von ein Seite on the one hand is das der Ketz und Soy Vesiyum. It's the conclusion, it's the end, it's the summary from dem Zman, from the time when Yosef is given in Beis HaSurim, Yosef was in a pit. Was dann ist die schwerste und niedrigste Zeit von Yosef's Sein in Golus. Yosef's being in a pit was the hardest and lowest point of Yosef's exile. Beis. Von der anderen Seite, on the other hand, is Dafkin Zman, Yenim Zman. At the moment, Yosef is at the lowest ebb possible. It's the kates of the worst. You have the kates, unaschala from Gulas Yosef, is the edge of the redemption and the incredible rise of Yosef HaTzadik. You know what this is saying? It's the old adage that says when it can't get worse, it can't get better. The word miketz summarizes the worst and the best in one word. Vayhi miketz, Yosef reaches the end. And Yosef reaches the beginning. They're synonyms. So what the Rebbe wants to do is, he says, Rashi is explaining Pshat, Miketz means an end. Even Ezra is explaining Pshat, Miketz means a beginning. We're explaining a philosophical idea. Miketz means a turning point. In other words, even when the end is not ushering in the beginning, if the end is as low as it could get, the beginning has to start. It can't be a vacuum. It has to happen. When you can't get worse, it gets better. That idea is in the word Vayhi Miketz. Vayhi Miketz means when Yosef's worst Golus ends, Yosef's best Golus begins. They're not two events. They're not sequential. A brings to B. It's the same. The moment when it can't get worse, it gets better is simultaneous the worst and the best moment. Miketz is that word, that moment. Unadem inyin is Rashi merambas. Rashi is hinting to this notion. Aleph, die Tchila und Reish von die Shnesayim Yomim bechakumen später. It's the head and the beginning and the head, from the years that are going to follow. Was das meint, which means in other words, as dann hat sich angefangen Geulas Yosef, the beginning of Yosef's redemption, as he remains redeemed within the exile, begins right now. Matim zu Pirush HaPnimi, there's a mysticism associated with this, and the mysticism associated with this is called Ketz HaYomin, the beginning of the right side. Beis, there's Soif from the Shnesayim Yomim, it's also the end of the 2 years. Was eine given fear that was before, as Dan is given their Sofa, Golos is the end of Golos, and the Pnimi is Ketz the smaller. And if you look in footnote 25, you'll see a Kabbalistic term. The Kabbalistic term is called Ketz HaYamin and Ketz HaSmar. There's the end of the right side and the end of the left side. Now you should know that there's also a difference between the word Ketz HaYamim and Ketz HaYamin, but our Sikh is not talking about that. Our Sikh is simply toward the end of the left and the beginning of the right. Ketz HaSmar and Ketz HaYamin. It says the Rebbe, the word Vayhi Miketz connotes both. That when the left finishes, the right begins. Vayhi Miketz, it was at the point of the edge of the left side, the edge of Tzaras, and the edge of the right side, the beginning of redemption. So the word Ketz means both. When it can't get worse, it gets better. So the word Ketz means Ketz HaSmar, the word Ketz means Ketz HaYamin, the edge of the left, the edge of the right. Which one is it? The answer is both. Because when it can't get worse, it can't get better. And then the Rebbe says on page 201, in other words still, Durch dem Biru und Allah, only when one is able to effect a clarity and an uplifting. For the Nitzutzes Kedusha B'chagafin Zechaketz the small, of the sparks of holiness which find itself on the holy, of the edge which is the left. Kumfmet Zechaketz Yamin, can you come to the edge which is the right. That means to say, only when you reach the deepest darkness do you come to the greatest light. You finish correcting, transforming, elevating the left side, and the right side emerges right away. And the Rebbe finishes the Sicha by saying, Durch dem Bider from Ketz the smaller, by bringing clarity to the edge of the left side. Vetmen kumen to Ketz HaYamin, you come to the edge of the right side, and the Gula, Vitzida, Durch Mashiach, Tzidkenu, Yahweh, V'Yagalenu, B'Karev Mamash. So now let's dig a little deeper. What's the Rebbe really saying? 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 All of us know about perspective. Perspective means how something exists from your point of visual. There are 9 students and a teacher in this room. Every one of you has a different perspective because you're sitting in a different spot. If it's true about people sitting in a classroom, it's true about life. People have different perspectives on different things. Their perspectives vary. Some people's perspectives are that what's going on is very good. Some people's perspectives are that what's going on is very terrible. And most people's perspectives are that what's going on is someplace in between the two extremes. Agreed. I suppose the philosophy of this sikh is that when your perspectives are able to identify the maximum of good and the maximum of evil in a particular situation, you discover that they're exactly the same thing. When you're able to get to the very essence of anything in Eibishter's world, or to say fancy words, you're able to understand what God is doing, the ultimate evil and the ultimate good become the same. So you can translate the word Miketz, you got to the bottom of it. Not to the edge, not to the extreme, to the bottom. Yossi is going through who knows what kind of stuff. The moment he gets to the very bottom of it, the bottom of it is the worst moment and the best moment, wrapped into one. And that's the transition from the worst situation to the best situation. Which means if you were a psychologist, you would explain it this way. When you fully appreciate what's going on with you, you will simultaneously see that what's going on with you is really very bad, and simultaneously that what's going on with you is very good. In other words, what's going on with you is a very great challenge. It's a challenge to help you see what's hidden beneath it, and when you meet the challenge and you discover what's really, really beneath it, suddenly you see that it's very good. So that's the Miketz. Yosef is sitting in prison, and when Yosef understands the depth of how bad his situation is, he sees the good. The good is he's going out of there. He's going to be redeemed. Just a thought.